Previously on Reconstructing the Great Sphinx. I went on a fair bit about how artists in the past and present could not draw an accurate representation of the Sphinx to save their souls. The culprit in almost every case was either a mountain of false assumptions made and or poor observational and drawing skills. Well, to my chagrin, I quickly came to realize that I had a few of my own false assumptions blindsiding me. I actually want to see what the face of this monument looks like before the ravages of time and vandalism marred it almost beyond recognition. I want to see it as the Romans and the Greeks before them saw it. Actually, I want to see it as the ancient Egyptians saw it. That's my motivation in taking on this project. It's no secret that portraiture is considered one of the toughest subjects to do well. As any artist who has ever drawn, painted, or sculpted a portrait will attest, the tough part is capturing the character and likeness of the subject. The Sphinx, while not a living subject but a stone sculpture, still has a distinct character, actually, yet evident. Admittedly, just barely evident. I suppose it's one of the reasons why capturing a likeness and character of that face has been such an elusive challenge for so many artists throughout time. So I decided to take a deep dive, make a serious study into that faint but still evident character of the Sphinx. What you're seeing here is a sketch, a result of me studying numerous photographs of the state of the Sphinx in its ruinous state circa 1900s, sometime before it was restored. By restored, I mean that the gouges seen here on the forehead and along the left lappet of the Nemes headdress was filled in with concrete. Concrete was used to shore up the bottom of the horribly damaged lappets as well. The Egyptologist in charge of this restoration was the first native Egyptian to be appointed professor of Egyptology at the University of Cairo, one Salim Hassan. Anyway, I wanted to study the face in the state it was before Salim did his restoration. By taking this closer look, really getting down into the wreckage, I'm familiarizing myself with what intact subtleties remain. I'll step up the pace here a bit, bringing this sketch to completion. So as I was saying, by studying the ruin of the Great Sphinx's face, I'm starting to get a whiff of the barely discernible character of this portrait in stone. Because of the horrible accumulation of damage over the centuries, a seriously careful study of what's there is, I think, the only way to piece together a firm enough sense of it in the mind's eye. I use that term to describe the inner spatial imaging that goes on in a portrait artist's mind when working towards gaining a likeness of one subject. I've often told my students that in order to get a likeness of a person, obsessing over precise measurements between the eyes, for instance, or the correct distance of the bottom of the nose to the upper lip, won't guarantee a likeness. That fact is quite evident in the work of caricature artists. Here are a few of my own examples thereof. A caricature can contain extreme exaggerations of the features, and yet still be a likeness. Hence the term, capturing the character is actually what's important. The portrait artist John Singer Sargent, who's one of my heroes, readily employed exaggerations in his portraits. Consider this image. The image to the left is a photograph of the English writer Coventry Patmore, 1823 to 1896. The image to the right is a painting by Sargent. The artist exaggerated the length of Patmore's neck, and in doing so gave him a more regal appearance. Nevertheless, it still looks like Mr. Patmore, despite the exaggerations of his neck and the fullness of his hair. The artist captured his character. My point in bringing this up is that even though it is more likely than not, given the enormous damage to the nose and eyes, and in the case of the nose, its total absence, that I won't get the measure of those features down with 100% absolute exactitude. I should, however, with the proper care and study, capture the character of that face well enough to get the likeness that I'm after. From the chin on down, the weathering of the rock upon the Great Sphinx's neck and body is way more extreme than it is upon the head. Egyptologist Mark Lenner explains in his book, The Complete Pyramids, that the Sphinx head and the body are made up of different layers of rock. The head was carved from a much better building stone than the soft layers of the body, he says, while the base is carved from a petrified hard shoal and coral reef. Interestingly enough, the three Roberts, Robert Temple in his book The Sphinx Mystery, and Robert Schock and Robert Bauval in their book Origins of the Sphinx, point to the same thing about the Sphinx body being composed of different layers of soft and hard limestone as well. So everyone is on the same page, at least here. Lenner makes note that the head does indeed look too small for the body. His explanation, however, is based on an assumption. Remember what I've been saying about our assumptions often leading us astray. Anyways, Lenner briefly describes a fault in the rock more than halfway along what was to become the body of the Sphinx. He then goes on to suggest that the original sculptors made some changes on the fly, one of which was to elongate the lion body to compensate for the fault. This then is the reason for the disproportionate size of the pharaoh's head to the lion's body, he says. Despite the fact that not only is the length of the lion body disproportionate to the head, but the bulkiness of the entire lion body as well. Apparently that observation failed him. As I read Lenner's books and his ideas about this, I kept thinking, really? The skill and technology that built the mountainous pyramids within a few inches of perfection allowed a fault in the bedrock to determine the proportions of the Great Sphinx? Really? This much is clear. Proportions and aesthetics played a major role in all of Egyptian art and architecture. Therefore, it is far more probable that the smallness of the head is a direct result of having been recarved/repaired several times over the millennia. That is certainly more likely than it having been disproportionately carved out of the rock right from the start. Yet Lenner casually dismisses that idea to a fault. Pun intended. Take a look at the drawing I did of the Great Sphinx as it appeared in the time of Thutmose IV, and quite possibly as it appeared in Roman times. I took my proportions off the detailed drawings Mark Lenner included in his book, The Complete Pyramids, which demonstrates clearly the present size of the head to the body ratios seen today. I invite you to do a little imaginative exploring with me now, but let's tether it to reason and reality somewhat. So, is it really a stretch to suppose that the original head on the lion body may have actually been that of a lion? So here it is, my idea of what the head may have looked like when the Great Sphinx was freshly cut from the bedrock. Now let's imagine that after several hundred years, that head sustained some damage, erosion and willful vandalism, for instance. Along comes a new king generations later. He wants to make an impression upon his own people and onto posterity. He has his sculptors carve his features into the damaged head of the lion. Now imagine several hundred more years pass. Again, erosion and vandalism have their way. And then another king comes along, and he too would like to impress his people and posterity. So he has his sculptors carve his image into the ruined face that was there before him. And there you have it. Each time this was done, the head got smaller and smaller. I ask you, is that a more likely explanation for the small head we see there today? You decide for yourself. I, for one, think the answer is yes. Could be wrong. Perhaps at some future date, we will find evidence to the contrary. All right, I think that's it for now. Next episode, I'll show you the newly resketched restoration drawings based upon the ones shown in this episode. We'll get that nose back on the Sphinx. So stay tuned, and don't hesitate to subscribe if you found this at all interesting. Thank you.